We put out a call to tested members for questions. Can you even describe what your first? Josh MM asks, can you even describe what was your first spacewalk like when you found yourself finally out there after all of that preparation? Was it what you expected? Did you feel vertigo or anything you weren't expecting?
I didn't feel any vertigo. By the time we on the shuttle, we didn't do anything major until day 3 because they wanted any nausea or vertigo you might have is kind of gone by day 3. So we didn't do rendezvous. Rendezvous was on day 3.
And it's impossible to know how someone's going to do.
Yeah, but yeah, it is hard to know. Usually, my first flight, I threw up on my first day. My second flight, I was fine the whole time. So I think your brain kind of remembers.
All right.
It's like if you get another, you should get another ride.
They only take one civilian every 2 years.
Yeah, so why don't you do that again in 2 years? Because I bet you'll find that whatever your body brain, you'll remember a lot of the stuff. It'll feel more natural to you.
The most throwing up I've ever done is in the back of a Blue Angels jet.
Okay, I wouldn't. But you want another one of those rides? I bet you'll be fine. Your brain kind of remembers what it adapts. It's a conflict of your senses that leads to vertigo. So I didn't feel any of that. That was over with. But what's it?
What was your first spacewalk like? What you expected?
Yeah, so none of that stuff. I really wasn't sure what to expect because the way I used to think of the spacewalk is for us as an astronaut, this was a big event. Getting out on a spacewalk on Hubble, that's a big deal. That's like playing in a World Series or a Super Bowl or something like that. But I'd never been on a field before. It's like walking into the Super Bowl and this is what a football field looks like. So that's what I felt like, that we had simulated it underwater.
Thousands of hours.
A lot of time underwater and in simulators and all kinds of ways, virtual reality to get us ready. And you piece all those things together. And
so you understand the order of operations at a deep level.
Yes, and I was really well prepared. Again, going back to, I really didn't think that I was maybe, but I really was. I was well trained, and they wouldn't let me go if I wasn't. The truth of it was, they would come up with some excuse to get me out of there. But I was ready to go, even though I didn't quite believe it. But once I got out there, the first reaction, was like, I remember waiting as they close the door of the airlock on the other side, and then they depress. So you have a closed door, hit a space.
Right.
And then they close this door and they lock you in. And then they start the depress operation. And eventually you go down to vacuum. But I just kind of...
And that going into vacuum, the suit's properties change?
Yeah, the suit still feels the same. It's pressurized just like it was previously. So what you'll notice is like you're moving... Now, in the water, for example, it's actually easier, I think, to spacewalk in the water. Some people would complain because things are heavier in gravity, but it stabilizes you. You're more stable in the water. In space, you've got to be, I think, a lot more careful because if you would behave the same way, a little bit of push is going to send you flying.
Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
The first few minutes of a spacewalk were dedicated, and I think they still probably do something like this. It's a translation adaptation, which means 10 minutes to understand what it's like to move around out there near the airlock. You get to do a little a test run of everything to see how you feel.
That sounds thrilling.
But I remember, it's cool. I remember looking, and you also get your picture taken. That's the other thing you do. So your first thing is you got to get your picture taken, and then you, because Neil Armstrong never got there's no pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon. Did you know that one?
Right, because he's taking them all. There's one in Buzz's visor.
Right, exactly. And that reflection of Neil Armstrong in the visor is like the only photo of him on the moon because he's taking a picture of the other guy. Alan Bean, have you ever gotten a chance to meet Alan? The fourth guy on the moon was an artist as well.
Yeah.
And he took that little image and painted Neil Armstrong on the moon. It's one of the paintings that Alan did. But that adds to the legend of Neil Armstrong.
Truly.
Right? Imagine going to the... Like, we already took a selfie that I sent to my son earlier. Imagine going to the moon and not getting a picture of yourself.
Right.
That wasn't his concern. He'll take the picture of the other guy. Anyway, we learned our lesson. You get your picture taken the first thing. As soon as you're going to go up to the window and get your picture taken. But I remember looking at that hatch and wondering, like, what's on the other side? That's the door to space.
Right.
And then it's done, and we open the hatch, and Jim Newman, my spacewalking buddy, went out first. He was the experienced guy. This was his 4th flight. He'd done a bunch of spacewalks already. And he went out there, made sure the coast was clear, set up all the tethers, and he goes, all right, Mike, ready for you to come out. I remember I stuck my head out of the airlock. So this is a lot. Looking through the window is really cool, right? That was the first thing I wanted to do because you're inside the spaceship. But now you get outside. It's like now you're out in a playground. The whole sky opens up. And in this case, the whole universe kind of opens up to you. And He's up kind of where this guy is up there. There's a who is
Shark.
that up there?
Hammerhead
Shark. Okay, so he's up kind of where Shark. A little. There's another guy up there.
Oh yeah,
that,
Han Solo.
Han Solo's over there.
Yeah.
So he's kind of where Han Solo is actually.
Okay.
You can't see that, folks. But anyway, I stick my head out, and he's on a handrail, and he's got his visor up, so I can see his face, and he's just like smiling. Check this out. And behind his head is Africa. So I look up and I see his head, and behind him is Africa, and the thought is, how am I ever going to get anything done out here?
Right.
Because it's just so spectacular. And then I looked in front of me, and there was a handrail and one of the vent tubes, which just like the ones we had in the pool.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to this. This I understand. And I was okay. I was so well trained at the task. Went up to the window, smiled, got my picture taken, went around a payload bay, and went to work. So the first shot was overwhelming, but for me it was more all right. For the first spacewalk, I was well trained and kind of concentrated on the work. Took some glimpses here and there. My second spacewalk was much more comfortable, and that's when I really had a chance to look. And my first, it was a couple minutes of a break I had, and my first reaction seeing Earth was, this is so beautiful, we're not supposed to look at this. And I actually turned my head. No, this is more beautiful human eyes. And I turned my head, and I'm like, you idiot, of course you're supposed to look. And I looked I said, take another look.
That's really moving.
I looked a second time, and I started to get a bit emotional.
Yeah.
And I started feeling a tear develop. Now, remember what happened to our friend?
Chris Hadfield.
Chris Hadfield
Oh, good God.
had a problem with the drink bag, right?
Yeah.
And we had a new drink bag at that time. In the first couple flights before mine, they introduced it with a different bite valve, like a Camelback valve on it, you know what I was saying? And it was burping out water with the different pressures. And what happened to Chris is, it
starts to crawl.
It got into his, it mixed with his antifog. It floats around. It mixed with the antifog in his visor and then got into his eye.
Right, the antifog that was
soapy,
behind it. Yeah.
Right, so it was soapy water that got in his eye. So now I start to tear up, and I'm horrified that if this same thing happens to me, there's gonna be questions asked. Yeah. I'm gonna have to tell the truth that I was crying during my spacewalk. So I got myself under control and looked a third time, and the thought was, this is like a view from heaven. It's a heavenly view. And then I thought, nah, it's more beautiful than that. This is what paradise. This is what heaven must look like. And it changed my perception of where we are now. I can't imagine any place more beautiful than where we are on this planet right now, being here on Earth. It's that beautiful. I can't imagine any place anywhere more beautiful than where we are.
There's a cultural name for this experience called the overview effect. Yeah. Is that a real effect, do you think?
I think it affects people in different ways. It's not. I think the only thing I think it's a way maybe to classify it, but I think everyone has their own interpretation or their own experience of it. For me, it's just I even coming here today. I was in Monterey earlier and drove through San Jose, and then here and you go through the countryside. It wasn't along the coastline. Here is one of the most beautiful places
one of my favorite
in the
drives.
World, right?
Yeah.
But I took the inner route. It goes to like 101 and something else, and even that, the farmland and the smells of the plant, the garlic and
through the garlic,
Gilroy,
Gilroy.
You smell that stuff, and it's so wonderful. I think the experience I had in space, where you can't really smell anything other than yourself, your friends, which we do here as well. But you don't have the same smells and the beauty or the wind. There's no weather. We're missing a lot of stuff in space. Yeah. You can see the beauty of the planet is like, well, that's where all the action is. That's where the beauty is. That's where life is. That's where everything we know is. And now I think I engage the world differently. I think I appreciate that stuff more. So people react to it in different ways. That and also my sense of home changed in space. Like when I was a kid, I grew up just outside of Queens in a town called Franklin Square, and that was my world. And I went to college and started working and maybe traveled around a little bit more outside of New York, and I considered myself to be a New Yorker. And then as an astronaut, I was an American. I think I identified I'm from the United States. That's my country. That's where I'm from. But now when I think of home, I think of Earth.
Yeah.
I do. After going around it so much, because it hit me that everybody's down here. Well, down there when I'm looking at it. That's where my family is, my friends, where you and all of our friends here were. Everybody is down there in that one place. So everyone in the whole world, wherever you live, all of us share the same place, the same home. And so it changed my sense of where I'm from. I'm from planet Earth. So those are some of the things that changed for me. And maybe that's an overview effect. I think it's kind of lumped together, but I think everyone has their own interpretation of it. That's why you got to go up there, man.
I'm dying
Can't wait to see what you're going to say when that day comes.
When you're up there, how far were you in relation to the ISS?
So we're 100 miles higher, yeah. So we had, so Hubble was as high as they could get the shuttle. They wanted, since it being a telescope, they wanted it as far away as they could. There were a couple emergencies we couldn't recover from, like some engine failures that because we were so high, we couldn't recover from.
If they had happened.
Yeah. So because I was looking through the checklist, like one of the first things, hey, what happened to, the Ohm's engine failed for it, and they're like, worry about that. Worry about that one. There was no way to recover from a couple of those things. So
we were speech in the back pocket.
Don't worry about it. No, you don't need to worry about that. But so we were 100 miles higher, which gave us a view of more of the planet. We didn't get to see as much detail, but we got to see.
Does it fill?
It still fills your field of view. You get to see the curvature, so it looks like a gigantic ball.
Got it.
But it still fills your field of view. We did have toward the end, we had a more of an elliptical orbit that took us down to the lower orbit. Like we had, they wanted to lower our orbit a bit to get us out of the totally being in the higher orbit. There's more debris up there.
Right.
And this was after Columbia. This is on my second flight, for example, where we had the Columbia accident. And I was on Columbia right before that accident. The next flight was that accident. And so we were concerned about debris, not only on launch, which took Columbia out, but also on orbit. You can hit something and you get damaged that way too. So the higher orbits have more debris because that stuff's at a higher energy. It stays there longer.
Got it.
Even though it'll go through the lower orbits eventually, there's more of it up there. So we lowered like half of our orbit, or some of it. We went elliptical, and we were closer. And that was kind of cool because you kind of got both. You got like a closer view, and then you were a little bit further away for part of the orbit too. But that was spectacular to be able to see the curve of the planet with that view was really quite spectacular for us.
I feel like I'd wondered the same thing. How am I going to get any work done now?
Yeah, that was the thing. But we were so well trained that I was able to do. Yeah.